Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution.
Reverend Wendy presents a talk that explores and expresses the truths of unity, and that there are real-world practical things that we can do to deepen our experience of spirituality and help us in our daily lives.
So we're beginning a new series today, and I'm really looking forward to it. It to me is going to be a very fun time to explore together what I am calling 7 spiritual sticking points. 7 spiritual sticking points. Now, I got the idea from 2 different places, a little bit of a context for this. First, from the idea of the 7 deadly sins that was first, or relatively first, talked about in about the 4th century through a monk by the name of Ponticus. And then from a recovery novel that I had read some time ago by Edward Bear called The 7 Deadly Sins. Now, the 7 deadly sins that were identified in the 4th century, do you remember what they were? I know you weren't there then, but do you know what they are? I'll read them to you. Pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, sloth. Ooh. That doesn't feel very good, does it? We're not going to go over those. We're going to do a whole different set of 7 deadly, we're not going to call them deadly, but 7 spiritual sticking points. And these are the 7 we'll look at. First one that we're going to look at today is the need to know. The need to know. The need to be right. The need to get even. Uh-oh. The need to look good, the need to judge, the need to keep score, and the need to control. Can you see yourself in any one of those? And can you see anybody in your life in any one of those? Do not do this. Don't ever do this in church, okay? Only if it's a positive thing do you do that in church. We don't have enough therapists to handle that. So what do I mean by a spiritual sticking point? What do I mean by a spiritual sticking point? Because I'm saying that these 7 things that we'll look at over the next 7 weeks are sticking points. What I mean by a sticking point is that there are behaviors and attitudes that result in an impasse in our life. There are behaviors and attitudes that result in an impasse and that keep us from doing the inner work, the deep inner work of our spiritual growth and our healing. Let me repeat that. There are behaviors and attitudes that can result in an impasse and that keep us from doing the deep inner work of spiritual growth and healing. Why do you think that the need to know, because I'm saying this is a spiritual sticking point, the need, I'm not saying want or preference, I'm saying the need to know. Why might I suggest that it is a spiritual sticking point? Think about that for a moment. Why do you think the need to know might be a spiritual sticking point, might keep you at an impasse from growing spiritually or from healing? Lack of faith? Could be. Intellectually stuck? Keeps you in your head? Good responses, good responses. So I'll share mine. I'll share some with you that I came up with. It can keep us stuck in the analysis of paralysis. It can keep us playing small and safe. And it can keep us from letting go and moving forward. Now go back and think about, all right, the need to know. Can the need to know keep me stuck in the analysis of paralysis? Can the need to know keep me playing it safe and small? Can the need to know keep me from letting go and moving forward? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. The analysis of paralysis is that overthinking everything, over-planning everything, and never getting around to implementing. Now, am I saying that there is something wrong with thinking? No. Am I saying there is something wrong with planning? No. What am I saying? Over. When we do anything in excess, we create a challenge for ourselves. The need to know can keep us playing it safe and playing it small. Why do we do that? Why do we play it safe? Why do we play small? Fear. Fear. We're afraid of any number of things. We may be afraid of embarrassment, humiliation, ridicule. We may be afraid of failing. We may be afraid of succeeding. And somehow we think, well, maybe there's this little place I can play in my life where none of that will ever get me. But there's no such place like that for any one of us. It's an illusion to think that somehow we can play it safe and nothing will ever challenge us or frighten us, or that we'll never make a mistake or we'll never fail. And the need to know can keep us stuck in not letting go and moving on, in dragging the past with us everywhere we go. That's a pretty heavy weight to drag. To drag all of your mistakes with you, to drag all of your woundedness with you. You know, nowadays, if you take too much luggage on a plane, you get charged an awful lot of money, right? So much so that many of us start to think, do I really need that? Can I leave that behind? Well, imagine the costs that some of us are paying, dragging our worst mistakes with us everywhere we go. The lies or the stories or all of that stuff can get very, very heavy. Somehow we seem to think, if I just knew it all, if I just had all of the answers, if I just knew why it happened as it did, or why it didn't work out, or why he left me, or why she left me, or why I failed, or why I got into this accident, or why I got that disease, somehow we think if we could just have the answer to all of that, we could relax and everything would be fine. One of my criticisms of metaphysics, and I love our teaching. I've spent my life in this teaching and attempting to practice it. But one of my criticisms about our teaching is sometimes it's taken in a very, very surface way. I can remember when sometimes unity would be called the feel-good religion. And I think, well, first of all, I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling good. I don't think it's helpful to make people feel bad and expect them to do good things when they feel bad. But our teaching is not a feel-good, put a Band-Aid over things that really need to heal. Our teaching is about looking deeply within and understanding and owning what we need to own and making whatever changes we need to make. However, there are things that happen in our life that we just don't seem to have an answer for. And it can be so harming to another to slap a metaphysical, simplistic answer and say, well, what were you thinking that brought that accident on? Right? Right? We can get addicted to this need to know. And sometimes the need to know, and sometimes knowing, can actually result in a downside. Think of the story of the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve in the garden. It's a story of paradise. It's not a true story. It's an allegory. And it wasn't an apple. There's no apple in the Garden of Eden story. Go back and read a true translation of it. But the Garden of Eden story, you have Adam and Eve in the garden that God's created for them, and they are living in paradise. And God says, you can enjoy everything in this garden but one thing. Right in the middle is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You can enjoy everything in the garden, but keep your hands off that tree. What do you think they want to do more than anything? If you have ever raised kids, you already know the answer to that. It's the surest way to get them to do it is to tell them they absolutely positively are not allowed to. And so, of course, we know the story of the temptation, that Eve is tempted by the serpent to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because her eyes would be open and she would see and she would be smart like God. And she tempts Adam. And as soon as they're both tempted and they eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and their eyes are open, they notice their nakedness. And we are told that because of that disobedience, they are banished from the garden. What it really means metaphysically is because of that sense of separation, that sense of breaking apart, of not recognizing the internal wholeness, that is what banishes us. But that's a whole other story. You'll have to come to the Bible class for that. So it's the need or the demand to know that's the problem. There's nothing wrong with preferring to know. Feel those two words in your being, in your psyche right now. The need or demand for something. Try to feel that. I notice when I do that, I clench my hands. You know, the need to know, the demand to know, and the preference to know. Don't they feel completely different? They feel completely different because they are completely different. We can prefer to know. We can work toward knowing. We may really like knowing. But we have to recognize there's a difference between that and demanding it and needing it. A need is something that we cannot live without. Can you live without the answer to the question that you don't have an answer for right now? Did you follow that? The answer is yes, you can. How do I know you can? Because you're right here. It means that even if you've been struggling with why did that happen, or why this, why that, and you don't have an answer, it obviously isn't a need. It may be a very strong preference, but you don't need the answer to survive because you are here right now. As obvious as that is, it's a very important thing for us to understand. You see, perhaps the greatest need to know that we have is the need to know why. Especially the big whys, the serious whys. The why did that terrible thing happen? The why are there earthquakes? Why do planes crash? Why do are babies born diseased or deformed? Why? Why did that person take their life? Why is that young person dying of cancer? Why? The truth is that there is a lot of life, even approached through our spiritual practice and understanding. There is a lot of life that just doesn't fit into neat little packages. Here's what I wrote to myself last night. Maybe, just maybe, we don't need answers to absolutely everything. Maybe there are some things for which there are no neat and tidy answers. And maybe trying to fit everything into neat little packages keeps us from appreciating how amazing it actually is to live in this mysterious universe and to do so with trust. Let me repeat that. Maybe, just maybe, we don't need answers to everything. Maybe there are some things for which there are no neat and tidy answers. And maybe trying to fit everything into neat little packages keeps us from appreciating how amazing it actually is to live in this mysterious universe and to do so with trust. I know that there are things that have happened in my life, in the life of people that are closest and nearest and dearest to me, that have been heart-wrenching things. And I know what it feels like to continue to live too long in the question, why? Why did it happen? Why did it happen? Why did it happen? What I do know is that eventually we need to move from continuing to stay in that stuck place, that impasse place of asking why, which always ends with a question mark, to replacing the question mark with a period. There have been too many times, one time is too many times, but there have been too many times that as a minister I've stood before a congregation and had to do a memorial service either for someone who took their own life or for a family whose child was brutally murdered or killed. And what I know is hanging in the room during those experiences is, besides the pain and the anger, is that very deep question, why? We just so want to know, why did it happen? And those are some of the questions that we will never have a satisfactory answer to. But what I do know, for our spiritual growth and for our spiritual healing, there has to be a time and a place where we find our way through the question mark to the period. You know, there's a distinct difference between the way adults and children ask the question why. Children and adults ask the question why from very, very different places. For adults, why usually results in an impasse. For children, why usually results in discovery. Take that in for a moment. For adults, why usually results in an impasse. For children, why usually results in discovery. Why is that? Adults usually ask the question why from a place of resistance. Children usually ask the question why from a place of curiosity. And that's why the response is so very different. And so sometimes we may never know the answer to the deepest questions or the most painful questions. But there does come a point where we have to move beyond the question, find our way healing through the question mark to the period. Staying stuck in the questions or staying stuck in questions that don't have answers is harmful. I want to repeat that. Staying stuck in questions that don't have answers is harmful. And it's harmful because it keeps us from asking and discovering two very important questions. And they are what now and what next? What now and what next? And do you know why those two questions are so incredibly important? What now and what next? They can be answered. They can be answered. That's why they are powerful. And that's how we not only heal, but that's how we take our power back from a painful experience. Not staying stuck in why, moving through it to the period, to the place of, all right, what now, what next? Let me read a little bit from Edward Bear's book and then close with a practice and a quote. He writes in The 7 Deadly Sins, so the antidote then is to move away from the addictive, compulsive, driven need to know why things have happened as they did, and approach it with the light touch, a desire or preference to know why, a willingness to be shown or told why, but the ability to accept what is as it is for now without knowing why and focusing instead on what now and what next. And so you may have the opportunity to practice this in your life this week. If you notice that you're stuck needing to know the answer to something, and I'm not talking about preferring to know the answer, but if you're stuck somehow demanding an answer to something, stop and ask yourself, what is truly motivating that need to know? Am I being motivated like the child who is asking why and has a desire to know from a place of curiosity that leads to discovery? Or am I asking that question like the typical adult might that leads to or results in a sticking point, in an impasse because of my resistance to what is in the moment? Many of you know that one of my favorite texts besides Jesus' teachings on the Sermon on the Mount are the teachings found in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu's teachings. And here are a few lines I want to end with. In the Tao Te Ching, it said, the more you know, the less you understand. In the pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In the practice of the Tao, every day something is dropped. Not knowing is true knowledge. Presuming to know is a disease. Namaste.
The Unity Center, spiritually progressive, socially responsive, radically inclusive. We have services on Sundays at 9 and 11. Many people enjoy Reverend Wendy's talks and meditations and aren't able to attend the Unity Center in person. If you're part of our extended family from around the world and would like to help support the Unity Center, please go to our website or download our free app, which offers even more ways to connect with the Unity Center. Namaste.